are joined by Republican strategist Charlie Gerow and Mark Singal, our Democratic strategist. Gentlemen, thanks for being with us tonight, with me, I should say. I have a lot of controversial topics for you on the table, but I want to start with President Trump and Jerusalem. Trump expected, of course, to go ahead with the plan tomorrow to recognize Jerusalem as the capital of Israel. So I want to hear what your thoughts are on this first.
Well, if you're asking me, it strikes me as being a little bit naive and very reckless for Donald Trump in his typical fashion to barge in and bully his way into the Mideast peace discussions. For 70 years, there's been this uneasy kind of consensus that Jerusalem belongs not just to Israel, but also to Palestine. And we haven't quite worked it out yet, and I know it's taking a long time, but you just don't disrupt things and go in and say, we're going to do it my way or the highway. There's going to be violence. There's going to be bloodshed over this, and he seems like he's just plunging in without enough background.
Jerusalem has been the capital of Israel for thousands of years. It simply hasn't been recognized as such until just very recently. It should be recognized as the capital of Israel because it rightly is. And those folks from other countries that say an independent sovereign nation doesn't have the right to say where its capital is, frankly, are the ones that ought to have their sanity or whatever Mark is questioning with President Trump called into question. Because it's the right thing to do. It should have been done a long time ago. And the people who are willing to shed blood over this are people who, frankly, don't believe that the state of Israel ought to even exist.
Well, that's a little bit too simplistic, with all due respect, because this is sacred ground we're talking about, particularly the old city of Jerusalem. It's home to 3 major religions, and there is an affinity for this sacred ground that is inviolable.
And the Jewish people have the legitimate claim to not only the old city, but to the extension beyond that, because the old city, as you know, is not truly the original Jerusalem.
But what do? You just ignore the Muslims, you ignore the Christians, and
no,
you say
but it has nothing to
yours?
do with putting the capital of Israel there.
Oh, it does.
Nothing at all.
I do want to get one more topic in before our time is out, and that is the abortion bill. The PA House Committee approved what would be, you know, if passed, the most restrictive abortion bill. Governor Tom Wolf says he would veto that. So what is your thoughts on that?
Passed out of the House, hasn't yet been scheduled to go to the floor, passed out of the Senate earlier this year. It is a bill that simply scales back the gestational period during which you can get an abortion. For those people that say that abortion ought to be safe and rare, this makes it appropriately more rare because scientific advances have made conception, or viability rather, much earlier in the stages of conception than it earlier was.
Well, there's a lot to that. I can't argue with modern science and the ability to discern life a little bit earlier. I get that. The trouble is that the governor's in an odd position because he almost has to veto the bill because it does violate the Blackmun decision in Roe versus Wade, which means that it's unconstitutional. So it's going to have to be approached on that basis.
It doesn't, and there may be the votes to override a veto. Very, very close in the Senate to the override number, and in the House, there are a significant number of pro-life Democrats who are going to vote for this bill.
Okay, all right, gentlemen, we have to wrap, but you can hear more from our political insiders by tuning in this Sunday and every Sunday morning for Face the State at 8:30. That's with Rob Hanrahan. Thanks so much for being here today.
Thank you.